So welcome everyone. This is our first Evercam webinar, the first of many. Um, just a quick introduction. So I'm Owen. I'm part of the customer success team here in Evercam, team lead. And we've got Cody joining us from Barnhill, Director of Innovation and Professional Development. Am I right, Cody, that title has recently changed to Director?
That has.
Good stuff. Congratulations. We're going to run through the main topics here. We want to run through is the technology implementation plan. Cody has been instrumental in getting Evercam on board with Barnhill. Barnhill's used us on multiple projects now, and we want to see what that looks like at the start of a project, how we implement Evercam, and what's considered when we're doing it. So I suppose, Cody, the first question I'd love to ask you is what is a technology implementation plan?
So one of the things that we do at Barnhill is we look at our projects in a lot of different ways, but just kind of how we do our start of mobilization of a project. We do the same thing of mobilizing technology for the project. And that starts all the way back to when we pursue the job. And then as we work our way through pre-con into operations to start building the project, we understand that a lot of these technologies have to be implemented, a couple months in advance, maybe even a year in advance, to make sure that we're good to go in terms of qualifications of using the technology, but also making sure that the project as a whole is getting out of it what we set forth for it. So when we talk about an implementation plan in general, it's really the idea of taking the technology that's out there and looking at it from beginning to end, just like we would do cost estimating of a project, and trying to break down the workflows that we would use on the job to fulfill the needs of the project team.
And I assume then there's quite a variance then from project to project, kind of what that technology plan looks like.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, depending upon how big the job is and depending upon the complexity of the job, it's going to require different types of technology to be implemented throughout that process. And just like I said at the beginning, that project description, just at the very beginning when the project is set up, you're starting that initial review as you work your way to operations.
Brilliant. And then, so there's that included very early days. Are we looking at kind of tender stage? You'd already have that plan implemented and you'd have the tools ready to go?
Yeah, that's right. And some of those tools, like I said, are tools that are going to be in your toolbox for many years, and you're just adding to another project. And some of those tools, they're not going to be there at all, and it's more of a pilot project. But you can see the need through those workflows and that development of that plan as you work your way to operations.
Absolutely. Great. And then those tools, what do those tools look like? You said there you have a standard set that probably kind of carry over for a lot of projects, and then we have some, say maybe Evercam, and some of the functionalities we have within Evercam would vary from project to project.
I mean, a lot of the things that we would consider, especially on the front end and throughout construction, is going to fall into many different buckets. McKinsey did a study years ago in 2018, and they continue to do studies of the construction industry and where the technology is going and where it's impacting in each of those buckets. We follow those studies. We follow internal studies that we do within the region that we work in North Carolina in the United States. And when we're going through that, a reality capture is a major part of that technology plan, whether it's laser scanning, 360 photos, drones, construction cameras. All those different components are major parts of reality capture as a whole, and that's a major part of the general technology implementation plan. Obviously, there's everybody on the call that's familiar with construction. There's always going to be your project management software, regardless of which one that might be. That's got to integrate with a lot of the data that reality capture is pulling in so that you can use it for real-time planning on the front end and then throughout construction and to the back end. The other piece of that is a major impact is scheduling. Obviously, it's a simple topic is scheduling, but it's complex to be really good at it. And taking those different components and trying to tie those all together is part of that implementation plan.
Brilliant. You touched on two things there. Just that you absolutely do consider reality capture to be part of your technology plan. I'm going to share a poll here to see who else thinks it is, or if they do use it as part of their technology implementation plan. And you just the different functions that we would have, and one of them is just the construction cameras as reality capture. Right? We talked about this before the call. For a very long time, they've been seen not as part of this reality capture world. And I suppose, what would be your opinion on that? And what would others' opinions be as well?
Yeah, I don't want to skew the poll, so
let's publish this one first. So I think we're pretty highly rated, and yes, a lot of people do consider the plan. And if I just jump back to the list, let's start. Do people consider construction cameras reality capture? We'll give it a couple of seconds. I suppose on the first one there, when you're considering for your part of your technology implementation plan, was it always part of the plan? Like, were you always considering reality capture, or is this quite a new thing to be adding to that plan?
As the advent of reality capture became a buzzword, obviously, all these different components of reality capture are kind of coming under that umbrella now, right? We've had laser scanning now for at least a decade. Drones are closing in on at least a decade. 360 photos, we're well into that. And I would argue construction cameras are older than all of them. And they've been used for many, many years before any of those technologies even came about and became as powerful as they are today and what they're used for. So in the grand scheme of reality capture, that buzzword and that topic will only grow because there's going to be advent of other technologies that fall under that umbrella. It's just an easier way for our industry to communicate those different things, whether it differently than looking at it individually for all those. So that when we're doing a technology implementation plan, we're more looking at the big picture of it and trying to then dial in on the details of what each of those different workflows would be related. And my final comment on reality capture for construction cameras, it's always been known that it was the stigma of construction cameras was that it was a time-lapse camera. And the idea is that all the other forms of reality capture, other than maybe drone video, is really static, right? You get one picture, and that's what it is. And you get a very distinct, small group of time of reality capture. With the advent of where construction cameras are going, especially where Evercam has gone so far and will go, that's a dynamic platform because it's not just one picture or one part of time. It's that full platform that brings all those different components of static reality capture, one point in time, but it also gives you that dynamic look. And that's why I think that it's really important to note that construction cameras are absolutely, in my opinion, one of the major drivers of reality capture in the industry at the beginning of it all and going forward.
It looks like you're in good company there. I think everyone's in agreement that they consider the construction cameras to be part of reality capture, which is it's great to see. I'd love to see, and knowing you've been using Evercam a good bit from your exact experience of using it, it'd be great if maybe you could share your screen and show some of the tools that you found to be useful.
Absolutely. Let's see if we can get this right here. Yeah, so we started back using Evercam. Obviously, a lot of providers across the world of time-lapse cameras. But what we were looking for going forward was more than a time-lapse camera. So when we first started to look at it, it was back, I would say, 2016, 2017. So it's been quite some time now. And, I stumbled across Evercam, met Shannon and the group, Marco and all of them. And we wanted to look at one of our major projects, which was this project called 400H, which is 400 Hillsborough Street in downtown Raleigh. And we wanted to use a platform that had the capabilities of time-lapse, but also gave us the capabilities of bringing in some of those other components that I talked about, whether it was the scheduling piece of trying to look at plan versus actual, whether it was looking at the gates and trying to see production, whether it was recordings of different milestones throughout construction. These were major components of looking at that. And then throughout the project itself, we were adding more and more to it, bringing in the BIM compare and looking at that and how that compares to the schedule. We'll get into that here shortly. But all those different components as a whole back then, coming to today, have been built on in the other 3 projects that we use Evercam on today.
So really was just, we need time lapse and it'd be nice to have other things. And as we've kind of grown together, as I suppose, collaborating, you've added more of those functionalities on as you've seen fit or needed them.
Yeah, and the big driver was it wasn't just a time-lapse camera, right? Because if it was just a time-lapse, there was a bunch of other companies out there that do just time-lapse. But the reason why we went with Evercam was because it provided more at the time, and still does to this day, that we were looking for in that workflow.
Great. And then, so you kind of mentioned there, I think on the recordings, just using them from the major highlights and major milestones that you would have seen throughout the project. Kind of what milestones were they that you kind of paid attention to with recordings, and how did it affect your day-to-day role?
So the 3 of the major milestones in a project for us and in almost all of construction, obviously one is breaking ground. So the ability to see that process occurring. In this particular case, and in another job that's to the north of it right here, we actually had existing buildings on site. And on this one, we had an existing bridge to a parking deck that had to be demoed. So one of the biggest things for that particular part, it's not just the breaking ground, but it's that mobilization and that demolition of old to get ready for the new. These 2 projects as a whole also have major milestones of large excavations. Obviously, this is complete because now the building is finished. This one is in the process of being dug out right now. So that's another major milestone. Then the next thing is your superstructure topping out. And so there's a ceremony where that occurs and allows the public to understand that the superstructure of the building is complete when we put that last member into place. And then we have the final push to get the building turned over, substantially complete. And then we have the ribbon cutting at the end. So those are major components. Now, other milestones within a job, we'll talk about this on a little bit later, even deeper. But recordings are not just for milestones that we all love too, right? Obviously there's always going to be safety concerns on a project. We're no different than any other place in the world, and we're not privy to that. And the ability to use that recording to go back and see if there was an accident, somebody was hurt, how it occurred. That's a major part also in that recording, is seeing that damage to, let's say, with all the hurricane that we've had here in the last few years, just in North Carolina, and the damage we've had here. Being able to see, that type of damage from the weather was also a major impact. And then the last thing I'll mention too of recordings, talking with your subcontractors, and one of the biggest challenges with scheduling, and it's going to become more and more, is that people, when they agree to a schedule, they don't really understand what that means, that they're what they're agreeing to anymore. And that's becoming more noticeable by the day, due to the industry that we're and the succession of many people retiring from the industry. So having that ability to go back and tell them this is what we need to complete in the next 3 weeks or a month. Can you physically do that? In the past, it was always done by looking at a schedule and, through reason of the experience from the team, they could say, yeah, we can get this done in that amount of time. Nowadays, that experience is really leaving the industry.
Mm-hmm.
So having that ability to not only go back and say, we didn't meet the mark, so what do we need to do going forward? But you can also, from project to project, we also can go back and say, you know what, that particular trade said they could do this in a period of time, and really it took this amount of time for that type of project.
It's quite interesting there. I mean, first of all, just looking at even just this list of projects that you have, you can almost see each of those major milestones looking at this, right? We're at groundbreaking, we're at early stages there. Wilson Mills is very early stages. And then, of course, being the 400H, which, is the penultimate, right? We want to see it as it's finished. You touched on two really interesting things there around kind of the weather, overall safety, and how that affects scheduling. And within Evercam, we have that weather tool, and it's quite relevant right now, as you said, with the hurricanes that are happening. How do you use a tool like that to either get days back or to be able to say to the client, well, look, the delays are somewhat out of our control, right? You said that knowledge is kind of leaving the industry, and being able to think back to schedules. Now you can kind of use this as proof. I'd love to have you instances where you've used that tool directly with those conversations.
Yeah, so one of the big things is I'm kind of a weather nerd in general, because I love to fly planes, so I'm very in tune with the weather, because I get close with it every time I fly. And one of the things that our industry has always been plagued with is weather delay claims, because at the end of the day, in the contracts, there is contractual language of how you can actually claim those days. But what always comes down to it is the owner requires within that when you claim that day or days, that you have to provide evidence of that. And we've done that over the 100 years of us having this in our contracts. We've done that in many different ways with gauges and pictures and stuff like that. But what makes this so unique is that when you get buy-in for the group on this, and obviously certain contracts are going to be written certain ways, but on this particular job at UNC here in North Carolina, we worked with the client, and as part of the specifications, we got away from using an airport weather away, 10, 20 miles away from the job. That we all know weather changes completely. And what we have done, and we've worked with Evercam over the years to complete this, is they have that ability to have that data from that station off-site, right, at the airport. But what we now have that's included in this is we have our own official weather station. And I'll go back in time. The camera here is offline, so I don't know if it'll be available. But our own device is now on site, and it's an official weather station that is approved by the owner and by NOAA. And NOAA sets the amount of rain days in a certain area that you're supposed to, in the United States, for instance, that amount of days has to be included within your schedule for weather. And weather is one of the only things that we as a industry have no control over, but it absolutely impacts everything that we do every single day in construction. And so one of the things that we've worked on is that own device is directly on site, either on the tower crane or right on the trailer, and it is collecting that data firsthand from the job itself. And we're able to then tie that back with the live footage of Evercam. So
Hmm.
they're literally tied together, gives us that information in both places and together that you can justify those weather days. And we've been able to claim a significant amount of days so far on this particular job, so that at the end of the project we can claim those days back. And now, in the past, you had both, right? You had the camera and you had the gauge, but it wasn't official because the two weren't talking to each other.
Of course.
And now, with them being talking to each other, that's ingrained within the system. And
Hmm.
now the future of all this is that it does self-reporting, and it
Yeah.
looks at the NOAA report and says, we've met those amount of days. Here's the days that you get back for that area. And it not only does that, but with the AI in the brain that is involved within Evercam now, it's going to give you a high level overview when you go in here of the days just by looking at it and asking it questions. So that's a big part of the industry that I think it can solve.
And I think you touched on something there, just the marrying of the two data points, I think is where we really start to see value, right? You said, you've always had these two things separately, but just being able to so easily sync them together, just such a benefit. There's also a real challenge, right? We see there that camera is currently down, and as we said just before the call, like that is the hurricanes, right? Nothing is a perfect system, but it's the ability to still have important data and feed, even when we have an issue like that. Often those cameras are recording the background if we're not connected as well. I think another thing about kind of connecting those data points I'd love to see is you introduced BIM, you said earlier on, onto one of your projects. And again, being able to use that for what your planned build is versus where you're at now. It'd be great to see the use case there, and when you decided to get BIM on, what was the deciding factor there?
Yeah, so I think this is a big part of the industry. It's always been tough to do 4D type simulations. What's so great about this particular part of the product in Evercam is that it is not only a compare, right? That's what it was before versus what it is now in picture format, but using the model that's tied with, in this particular case, P6, Primavera, but also could be Microsoft Project. Having that ability that if you're using those products, tying that with the schedule tied into the model, and then using that real life plan versus action, because the actual plan is going to be on the left and the actual is going to be on the right. And just like I said earlier in the conversation, in this particular regard, when you're talking about a building like this that's high rise, we're having meetings months in advance and even weeks in advance with all the subs, looking at, okay, this is where we're at, this is where we want to go, this is a schedule. Do they truly understand that? Well, if you can show them a picture of that, like we see in 4D, where it's overlaid onto the construction camera, this becomes the plan, the schedule that you can actually see what has to get done. And this is the action. And if you get behind, then you can use this ability to find out what it's going to take to get back on track.
And we're seeing here, like just on the screen right now, is the final building and the final model, right? And I think, that's the best case scenario. They both end at that date and around that schedule. I'm guessing if we go back maybe a couple of months or a couple of stages, is there a discrepancy there at any stage where the P6 didn't match the works that were happening?
In that regard, what you would see, sometimes there's a resequence of of certain things. So sometimes in construction, we'll schedule it out, but once it becomes a little bit more known a couple of weeks in advance, there might be some resequencing that occurs, and then we just update that on the left. Of course, the other option of that is the sub thought that they could get this amount of work done in that amount of time. And that's what I was alluding to before.
Yeah.
What helped us here a lot, and we didn't have too many of those cases on this particular project because of that reason, and we saw that as an advantage, is if you have a situation, let's say, that says that these 3 floors have to be complete and they're shown not in green, which is in the progress of being complete, but they actually show it in its final state, and yet you're still working on it, just by looking at that you're behind. And I think there's only a handful of cases on this particular job where we had to go back and we say, look, this is what you agreed on in 3 weeks. We went over this in this particular type of plan, and you didn't hit the mark. So what do we now have to do to resequence that, send that back into Evercam, and now see if that plan will continue to work for us?
I think there's always a fear that Big Brother is watching. You're using a system like this, and especially as the subcontractors or if the client's the owner and they're using it to you, that there's this fear of adoption of a software like Evercam. There's this fear that it's just going to be used as a stick to beat me with. How did you kind of overcome those challenges? Because you talk a lot about kind of showing the system directly to your subcontractors, communicating directly with them, and also showing it to the clients, right? Having this, this open visibility of where you're at. Did you have challenges with adoption and kind of getting people on board? And how did you overcome them?
The big thing that we told them is it's transparency. It is contractual that we follow the schedule, right? There is some tough love that has to happen at some point in construction.
Of course.
And unfortunately that's just the industry that we're in. If we had 10 years to build a building, everybody would take 10 years to build it, but we just don't have those timelines. I think by being transparent, like we did on this particular job, and we always do as much as we can on every job, the ability for them to actually see what they had to complete instead of looking at a bar graph Gantt chart schedule puts it into perspective of the severity of what has to get done, and the conversation can be had at that 3-week look ahead versus 3 weeks later when they're late. Because the tough love is a lot easier in the beginning of that 3-week look ahead than it is getting to the end of that 3 weeks and it's not complete. Because now you have to expedite. And we all know that even if you throw a bunch of people in there and you work a lot of more hours, you're not guaranteed the production that you would have got. And so that's what we're trying to avoid as much as we can at all costs. And I think that's the big thing, is just being transparent to know our success as a contractor is your success in your individual trade to ultimately deliver the product for the owner and what the owner wants.
Absolutely. And then when it comes to reporting to the owner, I mean, I suppose if we imagine a world before you use a system like Evercam, compared to when you'd report to the owner with Evercam or a related system, what does that reporting look like? You said there earlier just about using a Gantt chart or different bar charts to show that information. How easy does it make it, or how has it changed your reporting up the stream?
Yeah, and I think this is one of the pieces that will get even better over time with the advent of AI and other products that are services that get implemented into Evercam. But reporting is a major component, not only from the subcontractor's point, but also from the general contractor and the designer. There's a lot of cases over the history of construction where we've had to manually do all this, either taking pictures, writing down all the different things that happened every single day, and the ability for this information to implement with a project management solution. We use Procore at Barnhill,
Mm-hmm.
and that ability for the photos to be dumped in from Evercam, for that information to seamlessly get into daily reporting, and then ultimately creating those reports for meetings that you have. That's not only the present, but also the enhancements in future of where it could go, and get a whole lot better with other advents of other technology included.
It's great. You said there about the way you used to do it is you walk around site and you take photos and you'd update it. That must be a massive time saver for the likes of the site team, the site managers, or even the project managers. Do they work completely differently now with Evercam as one of their tools at their disposal?
Yeah, they do, because the good thing is now all these different components of Evercam now brings in the static that they're all used to, and it brings the construction camera that they're used to all into one product. And now, instead of going to 4 or 5 other products, you can come here and it's either integrated with something that they're already using, or it's the own standalone product that's within the Evercam platform as a whole. And so you put that together with your project management solution, and you've got a full solution that allows them to do what they've always done, but takes a lot of the burden off of them on some of the tediousness of some of that reporting.
Brilliant. I think just closing out, you talked there about kind of the AI, and we have our own co-pilot that's in place now. I think we'll show that on a future project. Moving from one project to another, we're looking at this nice project view. What learnings do you take from, say, Barnhill to move to the next one? How do you then implement that? Does your implementation plan change? Does Evercam become kind of one of those standard blocks? I'd say Procore is one of those, as you said earlier on. That's just one of those standards. That do you find reality capture now is just you can't live without it on some projects, or is there still some that are kind of just it's not relevant, or it's not appropriate for that project?
Yeah, I mean, the good thing about our company, we do a lot of different types of projects, all the way in the $100,000 range, all the way up to $300 million, $200 million jobs. And we in the past we always looked at it as an owner type requirement. That's completely changed over the last 10 years with the technology, because it's not just a time-lapse camera. There's actual benefit other than it just taking pictures of progress over time. And our goal is to implement this on as many projects as we can. Obviously, there is limitations on certain sizes, being inside of buildings, how you do that effectively. But as a whole, big, large projects or even medium-sized projects have this capability of using this due to the nature of all the things it can do now. And I will say, on a big picture front, talking to senior leadership and people that manage your companies, the other thing that's so unique about it now is it used to be project to project type technology plans. But now, looking at it, as you said, looking at it more holistically, as this particular type of technology, like the other reality capture, is more widespread to all of your projects. And I think that's the advent too of something like the video wall, the ability to have that available for not only all the project teams if they want to see what's going on in our company in those particular projects, but it also gives our leadership, our ownership, our clients the ability to see, look at all the stuff that we've got going on and how we approach technology as a whole, but also more importantly, how we approach building our buildings in the future.
Absolutely. I think that you spoke about the video all there, and I think it brings us almost full circle. Just we talk about what tool you use at the very start, or what you wanted to get from Evercam was time lapse with maybe something else, right? We discovered there's a whole lot more that you've used there with Evercam. I'm gonna share my screen here, just show if it's okay with yourself, Cody, just that final video for 400H. I think it's quite a nice one. It gives it a nice idea of the work that goes into projects like this. While we're showing this, if anyone has any questions, it'd be great to throw them in the Q&A, and we're happy then to answer them as they come in. But I'll hit play and I'll mute this. I think it might be a bit loud. So Cody, just I suppose while we're waiting for questions to come in, we're looking at this timeline here, December 2021 to 2023. Were we on time on that particular project?
Oh, we were, yeah. As you work through this, as it's coming out of the ground, excavation wise, and then you're going to start to see the superstructure. And back then, coming out of COVID, especially in the United States, construction really didn't stop. We had a lot of procurement problems, as most of the world did. But because of COVID, this particular job, went to concrete. So it is a concrete podium project all the way up versus having steel. And you see that as PT and cast in place. So it's a little bit of both as we work our way up the superstructure of the project. Large tower crane construction right there in the middle of the project. So, and it's in a very, very tight part of town, old church to the east of it that you see in that picture, over 100-year-old church. We've got a really one of the best restaurants in the region is to the south of this. So very highly dense area of traffic flow across the site, or I would say not across it, but around it. And just trying to keep the general public safe as we're building this, mid high rise in downtown Raleigh. As we continue to grow as a metropolitan city.
Am I right in saying that's the main road in and out of Raleigh, right?
That one to the north of it is one of the major roads. It's a major egress road. So what was one of the major parts of the city is that we kept that road as clear as possible, because in the advent of a major natural disaster, we didn't have one, thankfully, here in Raleigh, but as you can see across the state, just in the last couple of weeks, that corridor has to remain open to allow people to leave the city effectively. And that was a major part of, the security of that. And we work with the city and the state, because Raleigh, that this building is in, is a state capital here in North Carolina. And there's a lot of security, obviously, around the city in general. So having that ability to make sure that we not only shared it with our client and our owner and our subs and the team, but the ability for the city to also use it to assist with their traffic flow as we grow as a city.
And so you even shared images and videos with the city while kind of communicating with them through Evercam or from Evercam. Great. And I can see also this is your it's just your loading bay that we had. So pretty busy road in the bottom left there with everything else that's going on already. Thanks so much to Cody for joining. I hope it was insightful. There's the beautiful end. It's almost like I timed this perfectly to end at the same time as the video there. Guys, thanks again for joining. Looking forward to doing another one. And again, final thanks to Cody.
And I'll just finalize the same thing for Evercam. Look forward to working with you guys in the future. And, I know Shannon joined a little bit later, but looking forward to some of the future enhancements with AI and the brain that are coming. So thank you, guys.